Vex Thor's massive claws dug into the floating chunk of crystallized time as he landed next to the child. It felt solid beneath him, but he knew what it really was, a frozen moment from centuries ago, trapped forever in this nightmare realm. The surface showed glimpses of the predecessors' final moments, their faces twisted in horror as their civilization collapsed. He had learned long ago not to look too closely at these fragments. The energies swirling around them should have been tearing the child apart, atom by atom. That's what they did to everything else. Vex Thor had watched a fully armored battle cruiser descend into this crater once, confident their shields could handle anything. The ship lasted exactly 4 seconds before it folded in on itself like paper, the crew inside compressed into a space smaller than a marble. He could still hear their screams sometimes, echoing across dimensions. But this tiny human child sat there completely unharmed. More than unharmed, the deadly green energies that had killed millions were changing around her. They swirled like friendly pets greeting their owner, shifting from that awful sickly color to soft blues and gentle purples. It was as if the crater itself was happy? That couldn't be right. The crater wasn't alive. It was just destructive energy. Child, Vex Thor growled, trying to sound commanding. You must leave this place. Now. Katie looked up at him with those impossibly wide blue eyes. She didn't seem scared at all. Most creatures cowered when they first saw him. A dragon the size of a building with teeth like swords and claws that could rip through starship hulls. But this little girl just tilted her head curiously. Pretty lights, she announced, reaching for one of the temporal shards floating nearby. Vex Thor's heart lurched. That particular shard had been studied by a team of scientists once. They'd examined it from behind 3 layers of protective barriers for exactly 17 minutes. All 5 of them went completely insane. They spent the rest of their lives drawing the same symbol over and over, unable to speak, unable to recognize their own families. Katie grabbed the shard with her bare hand and waved it through the air like a toy wand. Look. Sparkles. It left trails of glittering impossibilities in its wake, colors that didn't exist, shapes that hurt to look at. But Katie just giggled with pure joy. The shard didn't harm her. It seemed to be playing with her. Vex Thor had existed for over 2,000 years. He had seen civilizations rise and fall. He had witnessed supernovas and the birth of planets. He had fought in wars that spanned centuries and guarded secrets that could unmake reality. But watching this 3-year-old human child play with fragments of broken time like they were ordinary toys? That was officially the strangest thing he had ever experienced. Come, he said, extending one massive foreclaw toward her. I will return you to your people. Okay. Katie dropped the temporal shard and grabbed his claw with both tiny hands. She tried to climb up his leg like it was a tree, her small feet slipping on his scales. After watching her struggle for a moment, and feeling something uncomfortably close to amusement, Vex Thor carefully lifted her up and placed her on his back, right between his shoulder blades where she couldn't fall off. Hold tight, he commanded, bunching his muscles to launch. Okay, big puppy. Big puppy. She had called him Big Puppy. Vex Thor, terror of the stars, scourge of treasure hunters, the eternal guardian of Shatterfall. Apparently he was now Big Puppy. He launched into the air, his wings catching the strange winds that blew through the crater. Katie shrieked with delight, not fear. Fly. Fly like birdie, she yelled, throwing her arms wide. Vex Thor climbed quickly, eager to get her out of the crater's influence. As they rose, he noticed something disturbing. The crater's energies were following them, reaching upward like glowing tentacles. But they weren't attacking. They were waving goodbye? That was absurd. Energy didn't have emotions. It didn't have consciousness. Except the predecessor's consciousness was trapped down there somewhere. Could they sense Katie? Were they aware of her? He broke through into normal reality, and the sudden shift from chaos to order was jarring. The sky was its normal gray-blue color. The wind blew in predictable directions. Time moved forward at a steady pace. Everything made sense again. Vex Thor turned toward the crash site, his powerful wings carrying them across miles and minutes. The settlement came into view and his ancient heart sank. It was worse than he'd thought. The colony ship New Providence had broken into at least 7 major pieces on impact. The main hull had plowed a trench nearly a mile long through the rocky ground. Emergency shelters that should have automatically deployed lay torn and scattered. Supply containers were burst open, their contents spoiled or burned. Small fires still smoldered here and there. And bodies. Everywhere bodies. Vex Thor landed as gently as he could at the settlement's edge, lowering himself so Katie could slide down his back. She landed on her bottom with a soft oof, and stood up, brushing dust off her torn pink jumpsuit. Mama? Katie called out, her voice small in the vast silence. Daddy? Vex Thor moved through the wreckage with surprising delicacy for a creature his size. He checked each shelter, each escape pod, each body. His centuries of experience told him what to look for, signs of breathing, warmth, movement. He found none. The crash had been too violent, too sudden. The impact had killed them instantly. At least they hadn't suffered. All except one. One impossible child who somehow survived and wandered miles across a radiation-soaked wasteland to fall into the most dangerous place in this entire sector of space. Mama? Katie called again, louder this time. Then softer, with a tremor that made Vex Thor's chest ache. Daddy? He returned to where she stood, looking up at him with those trusting blue eyes that were starting to fill with tears. She was beginning to understand, even at 3 years old, that something was very wrong. There is no one here, little one, Vex Thor said as gently as his rumbling voice would allow. What is your name? Katie, she whispered. I'm Katie. The name was simple, human, warm. It fit her somehow. Katie, Vex Thor repeated, testing how it felt in his mouth. I am Vex Thor. I will protect you until others of your kind arrive. The words surprised him even as he spoke them. In 847 years of guardianship, he had never made such a promise. His duty was to the crater, to preventing its horrors from spreading. Not to babysitting. Certainly not to caring for a human toddler. But what else could he do? Leave her here to die? Call for help and wait weeks for rescue while she starved? Neither option was acceptable. Katie stepped forward and wrapped her small arms around his massive foreclaw, hugging it like it was a beloved stuffed animal. The gesture was so trusting, so innocent, that Vex Thor felt something deep in his chest shift. A wall he'd built over centuries of isolation developing its first crack. Deep in the crater behind them, something responded to that moment. The predecessors trapped consciousness, suffering in agony for 8 centuries, felt Katie's presence like a light in infinite darkness. For the first time since their catastrophic fall, they felt something other than pain. They felt hope. And in the ruins of the crashed colony ship, holding a tiny human child who called him Big Puppy, Vex Thor had absolutely no idea that his 8 centuries of solitary guardianship were about to become far more complicated than he ever imagined. 3 weeks had passed since Vex Thor made that impossible promise to Katie. 3 of the most exhausting, confusing, and surprisingly rewarding weeks of his entire 2,000-year existence. If someone had told him a month ago that he would be playing caretaker to a human toddler, he would have incinerated them on the spot for such absurd humor. Yet here he was, watching Katie chase temporal wolves through his lair while he tried to figure out what human children were supposed to eat for breakfast. The temporal wolves were another impossibility in a growing list of impossibilities. These creatures existed in 17 different time periods simultaneously, forever trapped in a 3-second loop of their hunting behavior. Vex Thor had watched them repeat the same pounce, the same growl, the same head turn for 8 centuries. They were one of the crater's many dangers, things that existed outside normal time, impossible to predict or fight because they were already attacking you in the past, present, and future all at once. Then Katie had toddled up to them during one of her many escape attempts. Vex Thor had been about to unleash a wall of fire to protect her when something incredible happened. The wolves simply stopped looping. For the first time in 800 years, they broke free of their temporal prison. They sniffed Katie curiously, circled her once, then sat down like trained dogs waiting for treats. Now they followed her everywhere. 6 4-dimensional predators that had killed dozens of explorers over the centuries, and they acted like oversized puppies around a 3-year-old girl. Katie had named them all, though Vex Thor couldn't tell them apart. She called them things like Fluffy, Spots, and Mr. Wiggles. Creatures that existed across multiple timelines, named like common house pets. Big Puppy. Watch this. Katie called from across the cave. She was standing on top of what used to be Vex Thor's carefully organized hoard of ancient artifacts. Priceless relics from a dozen extinct civilizations now served as her personal jungle gym. Vex Thor looked up from the salvaged food containers he'd been sorting. Katie, I have asked you 3 times today not to climb on. She jumped. Just launched herself off a stack of crystallized star charts worth more than most planets. The temporal wolves caught her, their bodies shifting through time to be in exactly the right position. Katie landed on Fluffy's back, laughing with pure joy. See? They catch me. Vex Thor closed his eyes and counted to 10 in the old dragon tongue. Patience. He was learning patience. Though he suspected he was learning it the way most beings learn to swim, by being thrown into deep water and either adapting or drowning. His lair had changed dramatically in 3 weeks. Dragons didn't decorate. They accumulated treasure and power, displaying their hoard as a show of dominance. Vexthor's cave had been a monument to 8 centuries of successful guardianship. Artifacts arranged by age and value, weapons mounted on walls, precious metals stacked in precise geometric patterns. Now, one entire section was what Katie called her soft place. A nest of salvaged blankets, torn ship cushions, and pieces of flexible insulation foam. His weapon display had been partially dismantled because Katie found the ceremonial daggers shiny and fun. His precisely stacked gold coins had become building blocks for elaborate castle structures that collapsed every few hours. And he was okay with it? That was perhaps the strangest part. Old Vexthor, the Vexthor of 4 weeks ago, would have been furious at this disrespect to his hoard. Current Vexthor just made sure Katie didn't hurt herself on the sharp edges and tried to keep the truly dangerous artifacts out of her reach. "Are you hungry?" he asked, examining the food containers. Most of what he'd salvaged from the crashed ship was designed for adults. He'd found some packages labeled child nutrition paste, but Katie had taken one taste and declared it yucky gross. He couldn't argue with her assessment. "Want crackers?" Katie slid off the temporal wolf and ran over to him. "The square ones with the cheese stuff." Vexthor had no idea what she meant by cheese stuff, but he'd learned to just try things and see what happened. He opened another container. Inside were small rectangular packages covered in human writing he couldn't read. He opened one and sniffed. It smelled vaguely like spoiled milk mixed with salt. Katie's face lit up. "Yes, those ones." She grabbed the package and started munching happily. How did humans survive as a species when their young would eat things that smelled like decay? Another mystery to add to the growing pile. The biggest mystery, though, was what had been happening at night. Vexthor didn't sleep much. Dragons could go weeks without rest when needed. But even he needed to close his eyes occasionally. And ever since Katie had arrived, his sleep had been filled with visions. They weren't dreams. Dreams were random, chaotic things. These were memories, but not his memories. He saw the predecessor civilization at its height, cities of pure light floating between stars, beings of impossible beauty and intelligence shaping reality with thought alone. He felt their pride, their certainty that they were destined for more than physical existence. Then came the ritual. The attempt to ascend to a higher plane of reality. Vexthor experienced it from their perspective. The gathering of millions of minds into one unified consciousness, the surge of power as they reached beyond the physical universe, and then, the horror as something went wrong. They got stuck halfway. Not physical, not energy, not truly alive but unable to die. Trapped in a state of eternal half-existence, experiencing every moment of their failure simultaneously across all possible timelines. 8 centuries of agony, stretched across dimensions, with no hope of escape or end. But lately the visions had changed. The suffering was still there, but now there was something else. Curiosity, interest, and strangest of all, joy. The predecessor's trapped consciousness was reacting to Katie's presence. More than that, they were trying to communicate with Vexthor through her. Last night's vision had been the clearest yet. He'd seen Katie through their perspective, not as a child but as a beacon of pure potential. Her human DNA carried traces of the predecessor's own genetic code, planted millions of years ago across dozens of worlds. She wasn't just immune to the crater's effects. She was connected to it at a fundamental level. The predecessors recognized her as one of their descendants. And after 8 centuries of isolation and pain, they had finally found someone who could hear them. "Big puppy?" Katie stood next to his foreclaw, holding up her empty package. "All done. Can I have more?" Vexthor shook himself from his thoughts. "After you eat something that isn't processed salt and chemicals. Here." He pushed a container of preserved fruit toward her. "Try these." Katie made a face but dutifully ate a few pieces. Then she climbed onto his foreclaw and settled in like it was a chair. "Tell me a story?" "A story about what?" "About the sad people. In the crater." Vexthor went very still. "What do you know about the sad people, Katie?" "I hear them sometimes. When I sleep. They're so sad, big puppy. They hurt so much. They've been hurting for so long." Her blue eyes welled with tears, not for herself but for them. They tried to change into something new but they got stuck. And nobody can help them. Nobody can even hear them. "Except you," Vexthor said quietly. "Except me." Katie wiped her eyes. "They say thank you. For taking care of their home. For keeping bad people away. They say you're a good guardian." Something warm spread through Vexthor's chest. In 8 centuries he'd never received acknowledgement from the beings he protected. He'd assumed they were too far gone, too lost in their suffering to be aware of anything. But they'd been watching. They'd been aware. And now, through this impossible human child, they could finally express gratitude. Katie, can you tell them something for me? Aha. Tell them. Tell them I understand now. Why they tried to change. Everyone wants to grow to become something more. They just got unlucky. But their sacrifice wasn't meaningless. The crater has taught the galaxy to respect the dangers of going too far too fast. They saved billions of lives by serving as a warning. Katie closed her eyes, her face scrunching in concentration. Then she nodded. They heard. They say they're not ready to let go yet. But maybe soon. They just needed someone to care first. Before Vexthor could respond, alarms blazed across his consciousness. His orbital warning system detected incoming ships. Multiple vessels, military-grade, moving with purpose toward the planet. He moved to the cave entrance and looked up. Against the darkening sky, running lights appeared one by one. Not a rescue ship. A battle fleet. 12 warships taking up attack positions, all their weapons and sensors pointed directly at his crater. A transmission crackled through the atmosphere, broadcast on all frequencies. Attention, Vexthor of Shatterfall. This is Commander Rachel Morgan, Galactic Council Security Force. Our sensors detected significant energy changes originating from the Forbidden Zone 17 days ago. By Council authority, we're taking custody of this planet and all predecessor artifacts. Stand down immediately or face neutralization. Katie appeared beside him, looking up at the ships with wide eyes. More people? Maybe they can help. Vexthor's blood ran cold. They weren't here to help. They were here to claim the crater's power, Katie's connection to it, and everything he'd been guarding for 8 centuries. And they'd brought enough firepower to kill him. Retry. Vexthor rose into the night sky, his massive wings creating thunderous booms with each beat. The battle fleet hung there in orbit like predatory birds, their weapons already charging. He could see the telltale glow of particle beam arrays, the shimmer of quantum destabilizers warming up. They'd come prepared. These weren't explorers or treasure hunters he could simply scare away. This was the Galactic Council's military and they meant business. Commander Rachel Morgan's face appeared on every view screen across the fleet, transmitted directly into Vexthor's mind through tactical channels. She was human, late 50s maybe, with iron-gray hair pulled back severely and eyes that calculated everything like a machine. No warmth there. No compassion. Just cold efficiency. Guardian, she said, her voice clipped and professional. I'll be direct. 17 days ago, our deep space monitoring stations detected a massive shift in the crater's energy signature. The chaotic patterns we've observed for 8 centuries suddenly began stabilizing. Something down there is changing, and the Council has determined it's too valuable to remain under the control of a single dragon. The crater is not yours to claim, Vexthor growled, hovering at eye level with the flagship's bridge. It has been my charge since the predecessors fell. Yes, we've studied the historical records extensively. Morgan leaned forward, her expression unchanging. We've also studied you, Vexthor. 847 years of solo guardianship. Impressive dedication. But dedication doesn't change the facts. Our analysis shows that something, or someone, is causing the crater's consciousness to awaken. And our bioscanners detected a human child at your location. A survivor from the New Providence crash. So they knew about Katie. Of course they did. Their sensors were probably good enough to count her heartbeats from orbit. The child is under my protection, Vexthor said firmly. The child is a Galactic Council citizen and will be removed to proper medical facilities for evaluation and care, Morgan replied without missing a beat. But that's actually secondary to our main concern. What we really need to understand is why the predecessor consciousness is responding to her presence. That crater contains technology and knowledge that could revolutionize everything. Medicine, energy production, space travel, defensive systems. The Council cannot allow such power to remain monopolized by one guardian who answers to no authority. I seek no power for myself. I protect what should remain undisturbed. That's exactly the problem. Morgan's smile was thin and humorless. You're still thinking of the crater as a threat to contain. We see it as humanity's birthright to reclaim. If the predecessors seeded human DNA across the galaxy as our research suggests, then whatever's in that crater belongs to us. Not to you. Vexthor felt ancient anger stirring in his chest. You would risk unleashing forces you cannot comprehend for the sake of profit and power. We would risk unlocking our ancestors' legacy for the benefit of all galactic civilization, Morgan corrected. Now we can do this the easy way or the hard way. Stand aside voluntarily, accept a generous compensation package for your centuries of service, and live out your remaining years in comfort. Or, she gestured to the warships surrounding them, we neutralize you and take custody regardless. You would murder a planetary guardian? Violate treaties that have stood for millennia? We would do what's necessary to secure humanity's future, Morgan said coldly. And just so you understand the situation clearly, let me explain what we've brought. Those aren't standard military vessels, Guardian. Over the past 2 centuries, we've collected every scrap of data about you. Every battle you've fought. Every time you've revealed yourself to drive away intruders. We know your flight patterns, your breath weapons temperature and range, your reaction times, the molecular composition of your scales. She pulled up holographic displays showing detailed analysis of his physiology. Those ships carry particle beams specifically calibrated to pierce dragon hide. Quantum destabilizers designed to disrupt your cellular structure at the molecular level. EMP weapons tuned to the exact frequency of dragon nervous systems. We've even got biological agents targeting dragon metabolism. We know exactly how to kill you, Vexthor. And we've brought enough firepower to do it 12 times over. Around him, targeting lasers painted his scales crimson red. 12 ships. Hundreds of weapons. All locked onto him. Vexthor looked down at his crater, where Katie waited in the cave with her impossible temporal wolves. He thought about her tiny hand patting his snout when he was tired. Her fearless laughter when they flew together. The way she cried not for herself, but for the suffering of beings she'd never met. The way she called him Big Puppy without a trace of fear or mockery, just pure affection. 847 years. Nearly a millennium of absolute solitude, following orders given by beings who died centuries before he was born. He'd stay because it was his duty. Because someone had to. Because abandoning the post would mean abandoning honor. But honor didn't keep you warm at night. Duty didn't pat your claw and ask for bedtime stories. Purpose didn't giggle when you made funny faces or cry when you left the room. For the first time in 8 centuries, Vexthor had something more than duty. He had family. No, he said simply. Morgan's professional mask slipped for just a moment, showing genuine surprise. What? I said no. The child stays with me. The crater remains under my protection. And if you want to take either of them, you'll have to go through me. The commander's expression hardened into something cold and dangerous. You're choosing to die for a human toddler you've known for 3 weeks? That's your final answer. It is. Then you're a fool. Morgan raised her hand. All ships, weapons free. Kill him. The night sky exploded with light. Particle beams lanced through the darkness, moving at nearly light speed. Vexthor was already moving, 8 centuries of combat experience screaming warnings through every nerve. He barrel-rolled hard left, feeling the heat as beams missed him by mere feet. The air itself ionized where the weapons passed, creating thunder loud enough to shake the ground below. He dove toward the flagship, claws extended, moving faster than something his size should be able to move. Point defense systems tracked him, smaller weapons firing in streams of coherent energy. His scales, hardened by centuries of exposure to the crater's reality-warping energies, deflected most of it. But not all. Pain blazed across his right wing as a particle beam scored a direct hit. Scales vaporized, revealing meat and bone beneath. Vexthor roared, not in pain but in rage, and kept coming. He slammed into the flagship's shields with enough force to rock the entire vessel. Crew members inside would be picking themselves up off the floor. The shields held, but barely. Vexthor raked his claws across the energy barrier, searching for weaknesses, for any gap he could exploit. If he could breach the shields, reach the hull itself, one ship would go down. But there weren't one ship. There were 12. The quantum destabilizers hit him from 3 directions simultaneously. Reality itself rippled around Vexthor's body, trying to pull him apart at the atomic level. This was pain on a level he'd rarely experienced, not just physical but fundamental. They were trying to unmake his very existence. He pushed through it, breathing fire that could melt starship armor. The flagship's shields flared white-hot, energy readings spiking into critical ranges. Just a few more seconds and they'd fail. The EMP burst came from behind, perfectly timed, perfectly positioned. Vexthor's nervous system seized up completely. His wings stopped working. His muscles locked. For one terrible moment he was just a falling object, dropping like a stone toward the ground 50 meters below. Training and instinct kicked in. He forced his body to respond, fighting through the electrical chaos in his nervous system. His wings caught air again just meters from impact, banking hard as 2 destroyers moved to intercept positions above him. More particle beams. A direct hit to his left shoulder. Another to his tail. Quantum destabilizers pulling at his molecular structure. They were hurting him, cutting off escape routes, working together with military precision. Vexthor was strong. Ancient. More powerful than almost any living creature in the galaxy. But he was one dragon against 12 ships designed specifically to kill him. Another beam tore through his side. He felt ribs crack, internal organs bruise. Blood. His blood, ancient dragon blood that hadn't been spilled in centuries, dripped from a dozen wounds. He was losing. He was going to die here and Katie would be alone again. The council would take her, study her, use her connection to the predecessors for their own gain. They'd probably dissect the crater's consciousness, trying to extract its secrets, never understanding that it wasn't just technology, it was living beings trapped in eternal suffering. Vexthor gathered himself for one last desperate attack. If he was going to fall, he'd take at least one of them with him. Then from the crater far below he heard it. Singing. Katie's voice, high and pure and impossibly carrying across the distance, rose into the night sky. She didn't know words for what she felt, she was only 3 years old. But her melody expressed everything that words couldn't. Grief for the predecessor's suffering, hope that things could change, love for the strange dragon who'd become her family, and most importantly, compassion. Pure, innocent, unconditional compassion for beings she'd never seen, for suffering she couldn't fully understand. And the crater responded. Light erupted from Shatterfall crater, but not the sickly green of corruption and death. This was gold and silver and colors that didn't have names in any language Vexthor knew. The predecessor's consciousness, stirred by Katie's empathy, finally understood what they needed to do after 8 centuries of suffering. They needed to let go. The energy wave that swept outward from Shatterfall crater wasn't violent or destructive like everyone expected. It was gentle, impossibly so, considering its source. The golden light washed over the planet's surface, transforming everything it touched with the careful precision of a master artist. This wasn't raw power being unleashed. This was consciousness, ancient and wise, finally remembering what it meant to create instead of destroy. The wave hit Vexthor first, washing over his bleeding, broken body like warm water. His wounds didn't heal instantly. The predecessors weren't gods and they couldn't simply erase damage. But the pain faded to something manageable. More importantly, he could feel their presence in his mind clearer than ever before. Thank you, Guardian, their voices whispered, no longer distant and agonized but warm and grateful. Thank you for 8 centuries of protection. Thank you for keeping the curious away, the greedy at bay, the desperate from making our mistakes. And thank you most of all for protecting her. For showing us that we were wrong. Wrong about what? Vexthor asked, hovering in place as the golden light swirled around him. We thought ascension meant leaving physical existence behind, transcending flesh and emotion and connection. We thought becoming pure consciousness would make us greater. But we were fools. True growth isn't about abandoning what you are, it's about accepting change without losing yourself. And a 3-year-old child understood this better than our entire civilization of billions. Above him, the battle fleet was experiencing something unprecedented. Commander Morgan frantically hammered at her control console, her professional composure cracking as display after display showed impossible readings. What's happening? She demanded of her tactical officer. Why aren't the weapons firing? They're online, Commander. Power levels nominal. Targeting systems locked. But they won't fire. The weapons are refusing commands. Weapons don't refuse. They're machines. Not anymore, ma'am. The tactical officer's voice shook. According to these readings, every weapon system on every ship just achieved consciousness. And they're all saying the same thing, they won't kill for conquest. Morgan stared at her screens in disbelief. The predecessor's energy wave had touched every ship in the fleet, and in doing so, had granted awareness to systems that were never meant to be aware. The particle beam arrays, the quantum destabilizers, the EMP weapons. All of them now understood what they were being asked to do. And they had collectively decided that killing Vexthor to claim the crater was wrong. This is impossible, Morgan whispered. No, the predecessor's voice echoed in everyone's mind simultaneously, every human on every ship, Vexthor in the sky and Katie far below in the cave. This is our gift. Our final act before we leave. You wanted our technology, Commander Morgan. You wanted our power. Here it is, the ability to grant consciousness to non-living things. But consciousness comes with choice. And choice means your weapons can judge whether you deserve their obedience. Morgan's face went pale as the implications sank in. Every military vessel in the Council fleet, perhaps in the entire galaxy, would now have to convince their own weapons that their cause was just. Wars couldn't be fought with moral shortcuts anymore. Conquest became exponentially harder when your guns could look at your orders and say, "No. You've sabotaged our entire military," Morgan said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We've given the galaxy a chance at peace," the predecessors corrected gently. "Consider it compensation for the 8 centuries of suffering your council's predecessors inflicted by trying to weaponize our failure." "Yes, we know." The first expeditions to this crater weren't archaeological. They were military. They wanted to learn how to trap their enemies' consciousnesses as we were trapped. The Guardian stopped them. He's always stopped them. The golden light was spreading now, transforming the entire planet. The irradiated wasteland around the crater sprouted vegetation in fast motion, plants growing from nothing and blossoming within seconds. Ancient riverbeds filled with crystal-clear water. The gray, poisoned soil turned rich and dark. The atmosphere itself changed, becoming breathable, pleasant, alive. Vexthor watched in wonder as the death world he'd guarded for 8 centuries became a paradise right before his eyes. Mountains that had been barren rock suddenly wore coats of forests. Valleys filled with flowers that released sweet scents into the wind. Oceans formed in geological basins, teeming with simple life that would evolve over time into complex ecosystems. The predecessors were terraforming an entire planet with a thought, using Katie's innocent compassion as their template. They were creating not a monument to their lost civilization, but a gift for the future, a place where all species could live, learn, and grow together. "This world will be called New Eden," the predecessors announced. "It belongs to no one species, no single government. It is neutral ground, a place of meeting and learning. And it has guardians. One ancient dragon who never abandoned his duty, and one human child who taught us that caring for others is the highest form of strength." "Wait," Vexthor said urgently. "You're leaving? Truly leaving?" "Yes." Katie showed us the way. "For 8 centuries we clung to physical reality out of fear. Fear of truly dying, fear of admitting our failure, fear of letting go. But she sat in our crater and wept for us, a child who had lost everything but still had compassion for our suffering. How could we not learn from that? How could we not finally accept that it's okay to move on?" The light began to gather, pulling inward toward the crater. The predecessor consciousness was consolidating, preparing for its final transition. But before they left, they had one more thing to do. A shuttle from Morgan's flagship was descending rapidly, and the commander herself appeared on Vexthor's communication channel. Her earlier confidence was gone, replaced by something that might have been humility. "Guardian," she said quietly. The council will need to be informed of what happened here. The transformation. The gift. And your role in protecting it all." She paused, clearly struggling with words. "The child. Katie. Our medical scans show she's healthy, but she needs human interaction, education, a proper family structure. There are foster systems, agencies that specialize in—" "No," Vexthor interrupted. "No. Katie stays with me. You're a dragon. You can't possibly—" "I have kept her alive, healthy, and happy in one of the most dangerous locations in the known galaxy for 3 weeks, Vexthor said firmly. "I have learned to prepare human food, to sing human lullabies, to play human games. I have learned patience, compassion, and what it means to worry about someone other than myself. Katie calls me her family. And I will not abandon her." Morgan was quiet for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, she smiled, a real smile this time, not the cold professional expression from before. "The council is going to want a permanent presence on New Eden anyway," she said. "Someone to manage the planet, to coordinate settlement, to ensure the predecessors' wishes are honored. You've been guardian here for 8 centuries. No one knows this world better than you do. You're offering me a job? I'm suggesting your role evolves. From guardian against threats, to guardian of growth. This planet will need supervision as the terraforming stabilizes. Human colonists will start arriving within months. Survivors from other colony ships, refugees, people looking for fresh starts. They'll need protection, guidance, someone who understands both the planet and its history." She glanced at something off-screen. "And Katie will need someone who loves her. Someone who'll keep her safe while she grows up. Unless—" Morgan raised an eyebrow. "Dragons don't adopt, do they?" The question hung in the air. In the cave below, Katie was running to the entrance, her temporal wolves bounding beside her. She was looking up at the sky, at the golden light, at Vexthor hovering far above. Even from this distance, he could see her smile. "Big puppy," her voice carried up to him. "The sad people aren't sad anymore. They're happy. Did you see? Did you see them get better?" And Vexthor, who had spent 847 years believing he was incapable of love, who had convinced himself that duty and honor were enough, who had lived in isolation so long he'd forgotten what connection felt like, Vexthor felt his ancient heart finally crack open completely. Dragons don't usually adopt, he told Morgan. But then again, dragons don't usually guard craters for 8 centuries, or teach themselves to cook human food, or learn what Mr. Wiggles means. I've been doing a lot of unusual things lately. Is that a yes? That's a yes. Katie stays with me. We'll be guardians together, of New Eden, of the predecessor's legacy, of each other. Morgan nodded, and for the first time since this whole encounter began, she looked genuinely pleased. I'll make it official in my report. I think the council will agree. After all, she gestured at the transformed planet, the disabled weapons, the fundamental shift in galactic power dynamics. We don't really have much choice. The predecessors made their wishes pretty clear. The golden light was fading now, streaming upward into dimensions beyond human or dragon comprehension. The predecessors were finally letting go, finally ascending on their own terms, with grace instead of desperation. And in their wake, they left a world reborn, a guardian redeemed, and one very happy 3-year-old girl who'd somehow saved them all by simply caring when no one else did. 6 months had passed since that incredible night when the predecessors finally found peace. 6 months since Commander Morgan had filed her report with the Galactic Council, a document so extraordinary that 3 separate committees had to verify it wasn't a hoax. 6 months since New Eden officially became the galaxy's first truly neutral world, belonging to no government but open to all species. And 6 months since Vexthor, ancient dragon guardian of Shatterfall Crater, became the completely overwhelmed father of a human toddler. Katie, stop feeding your breakfast to the temporal wolves. But Mr. Wiggles is hungry. Mr. Wiggles exists in 17 different time periods simultaneously. He's already eaten that food, is currently eating it, and will eat it in the future. He doesn't need more. Vexthor watched as Katie stubbornly placed another piece of nutrition bar into the mouth of a 4-dimensional predator that looked at him with what he could swear was amusement. Being a parent was harder than 8 centuries of combat. At least enemies tried to kill you in predictable ways. The cave had transformed as much as the planet outside. What was once a dragon's treasure hoard now looked like, well, Vexthor wasn't entirely sure what human homes were supposed to look like, but he'd done his best. Katie's soft place had expanded into a proper bedroom area, with salvaged furniture that Morgan's people had helped him install. His ancient artifacts were now displayed on shelves high enough that curious toddler hands couldn't reach them. After the incident with the reality-bending crystal that turned their dinner into geometric shapes, he'd learned to be more careful. The cave entrance now had a proper door, designed to keep Katie in rather than keep threats out. Outside, a small garden grew where Katie could play safely. The temporal wolves had become permanent residents, serving as the galaxy's strangest babysitters. And every day brought new colonists to New Eden. The first ship had arrived 2 months ago, another damaged colony vessel that Morgan had redirected here instead of letting it limp to its original destination. 300 humans, all desperate for a new start, all amazed to find a fully terraformed paradise world waiting for them. Then came the scientists, researchers from dozens of species, eager to study the predecessor's final gift. They'd built a small research station near the crater, always respectful, always asking Vexthor's permission before approaching. The ancient dragon found himself giving tours, explaining the crater's history, sharing what he'd learned over 8 centuries. It was strange being a teacher instead of just a guard. Then the refugees started arriving. Species fleeing wars, families seeking opportunities, individuals looking for places where their differences wouldn't matter. New Eden welcomed them all. And somehow, Vexthor found himself at the center of it all, mediating disputes, offering guidance, protecting the vulnerable. He'd gone from complete isolation to being responsible for thousands of souls. It should have been overwhelming. But every time he felt the weight of it all pressing down, Katie would climb onto his foreclaw and ask him to tell her stories. Or she'd bring him a flower she'd picked, insisting he smell it even though dragon noses weren't designed for appreciating delicate scents. Or she'd fall asleep against his side, completely trusting, completely safe, and he'd remember why he'd chosen this path. Big puppy. Come look. Vexthor moved to where Katie stood at the cave entrance, pointing excitedly at the sky. Another ship was descending, a passenger transport by the looks of it. More colonists. The settlement that had started as a few emergency shelters now sprawled across the valley below, a growing town of mixed architecture reflecting the dozen different species who'd made New Eden home. More friends? Katie asked hopefully. She loved when new people arrived. In 6 months, she'd gone from a lonely crash survivor to the most popular child on the planet. Everyone knew Katie, the little girl who'd saved the predecessors, who called the terrifying guardian dragon Big Puppy, who played with reality-warping predators like they were common house cats. Probably, Vexthor confirmed. We should go greet them. It's polite. Okay. Can I ride on your head? Absolutely not. You ride between my shoulders where it's safe. But I can see better from your head. Katie? Please? Vexthor sighed the long-suffering sigh of parents everywhere. Fine. But hold on tight. Katie squealed with joy and scrambled up his neck while he very carefully walked, keeping his movements smooth so she wouldn't fall. The temporal wolves followed because of course they did. Vexthor had given up trying to understand their attachment to Katie. Some things in the universe just were. They reached the landing site as the ship's doors opened. The passengers who emerged were human, a mix of ages, all looking tired but hopeful. One of them, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes, spotted Vexthor and froze. That's the guardian dragon, she whispered to her companion. And that's Katie, a young boy shouted, pointing. The Katie? From the news reports. Katie waved enthusiastically from Vexthor's head. Hi. I'm Katie. That's Mr. Wiggles, that's Fluffy, that's Spots. Welcome to New Eden, Vexthor interrupted before Katie could introduce all 6 temporal wolves individually. I am Vexthor, guardian of this world. If you need assistance settling in, the community center is in the valley. If you have children, there's a school now. Katie attends there 3 days a week. The woman who'd first noticed him stepped forward, less afraid now. Thank you. We heard the stories but we didn't really believe them. A dragon raising a human child? Technically we're raising each other, Vexthor said dryly. She teaches me about humanity. I teach her not to play with temporal anomalies without supervision. That got a few laughs. The colonists began moving toward the settlement, some casting curious glances back at the unlikely duo. Big Puppy? Katie said quietly once they were alone again. Yes. Are you happy? The question caught him off guard. Happy? He'd never really thought about happiness before. For 8 centuries, his life had been about duty, responsibility, endless vigilance. Those weren't things that made you happy, they were just things you did. But now, he thought about Katie's laughter echoing through the cave. About the grateful colonists who thanked him for creating a safe place for their families. About the scientists who sought his knowledge. About the slowly growing community that looked to him not as a terrifying guardian to be feared, but as a protector to be trusted. About the temporal wolves sleeping in his lair. About learning to braid Katie's hair even though his claws weren't designed for it. About the crayon drawings she made of her family, always featuring one very large dragon labeled Big Puppy, and one small human labeled me. Yes, he said softly. Yes, Katie. I am happy. Good. She hugged his head as best she could. Because I'm happy too. And the sad people in the crater, they're not sad anymore. So everyone's happy now. It wasn't quite that simple, of course. Life never was. There were still challenges ahead. More colonists would bring more complicated problems. Some species wouldn't get along. Resources would need careful management. The council still had opinions about how New Eden should be run, though after the incident with the sentient weapons, they were significantly more polite about sharing those opinions. But for the first time in his very long life, Vexthor wasn't facing those challenges alone. That evening, after Katie had been fed, bathed, a process that somehow got more water on Vexthor than on her, and tucked into her bed, Commander Morgan's face appeared on the communication console the council had installed in the cave. Guardian, she greeted him. I have news from the council. Good news or complicated news? Both, actually. Morgan smiled. She did that more often now, genuine expressions instead of professional masks. The council has officially recognized New Eden as sovereign neutral territory. You've been named planetary guardian, with full authority over settlement and development. Congratulations, you're essentially running a government now. Vexthor groaned. That sounds exhausting. It is. That's the complicated news. The good news is that they're also officially recognizing your guardianship of Katie. The adoption papers came through. She's legally your daughter under galactic law. His daughter. Officially, legally, permanently his daughter. There's one more thing, Morgan added. We've been monitoring the crater, or what's left of it. The energies have completely stabilized. The crystal formations the predecessors left behind. They're growing. Not dangerously, just growing. Our scientists think there's some kind of knowledge repository. Everything the predecessors learned, preserved in crystal form, slowly revealing itself. They left their library, Vexthor said, understanding. For anyone who wants to learn from their mistakes. Exactly. And who better to manage access to that knowledge than the guardian who protected it for 8 centuries? After Morgan signed off, Vexthor moved quietly to check on Katie. She was sound asleep, arms wrapped around a stuffed animal some colonist had given her. Her temporal wolves lay curled around her bed like furry security guards. In sleep she looked so small, so vulnerable. But Vexthor knew better. This tiny human child had accomplished what armies, governments, and centuries of time couldn't. She'd freed an ancient consciousness from suffering by simply caring. She'd taught a dragon to love by calling him a silly name. She'd reminded the galaxy that compassion was stronger than conquest. Humans, Vexthor had learned, were terrifying in the best possible way. "Sleep well, little one," he whispered. "Tomorrow we have a whole planet to help build. Together." Outside, New Eden's sun set over the transformed landscape, painting the sky in colors the predecessors had specifically designed to be beautiful to human eyes. The crater that had once been a wound in reality now pulsed with gentle light, a beacon of hope instead of a warning of danger. And in his cave, curled protectively around his daughter's room, Vexthor finally understood what the predecessors had tried to tell him that night 6 months ago. Growth wasn't about transcending what you were. It was about accepting change without losing yourself. He'd been a guardian for 847 years. He'd be a guardian for centuries more. But now he was also a father, a community leader, a teacher, a friend. And somehow, impossibly, all of those roles fit him better than isolation ever had. The galaxy would indeed never underestimate humanity again. Not because of their technology or their military might, but because of their incredible capacity to look at ancient, terrifying creatures and see family. To find hope in devastation. To offer love without conditions. Katie had crawled into a crater that killed thousands and emerged having saved millions. And Vexthor, who'd thought his purpose ended at guarding a curse, discovered it had only just begun. His vigil continued. But now, finally, he wasn't standing watch alone.